Boost Mobile is now sending experts nationwide to deliver and set up customers' new phones.
Wait, we're going on tour?
We're delivering and setting up customers' phones. It's not a tour.
Not with that attitude.
Introducing Store to Door. Switch and get a new device with expert setup and delivery.
Delivery available for select devices purchased at boostmobile.com.
If you work in university maintenance, Granger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Granger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more. And all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRANGER, visit Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Scary. My name is Will, and each week I narrate your real life paranormal experiences as well as cover some famous paranormal cases along the way. If you have your own paranormal experience that you'd like me to narrate on the show, you can send it to scaryaparanormalpodcast@gmail.com and it just might get made into a future episode. As always, before we get into this week's episode, I need to say a special thank you to our new Patreon subscribers, who are James Aramakutu, JD, and Wilson Campbell. Thank you so much for signing up to the show's Patreon, and if this is something that you're interested in, you can find the link in this episode's show notes or simply go to patreon.com/scaryaparanormalpodcast. Over there you can gain access to exclusive scary episodes as well as ad-free main episodes, and a new exclusive episode will be released this coming week. But now, let's get into our next paranormal encounter. In 2022, my wife and my two daughters and I had to move out of our house for what was supposed to be a fairly straightforward renovation. We have two daughters, both under the age of 14, and the original plan was pretty simple. The work on our house was going to take a few months, and we needed to find somewhere temporary, not too far away, because we wanted to keep our routines as normal as possible and still be able to drive back and forth to check on the progress of the renovation. We were looking for somewhere within about 30 minutes of our home. That would be ideal. Unfortunately for us, staying with family wasn't an option, and we began the process of looking online for a property that would suit us. Eventually we came across a place that was a little bit more rural than what we wanted, but the price was good and it was available. And for a temporary place, it seemed like the only option, really. What made it all move so quickly was that the very same day that we found the listing, a family member happened to mention that a friend of theirs actually knew the owner. And within a few hours, there had been a few phone calls and messages back and forth, and suddenly the whole thing felt pretty much done and dusted. And it was really one less stressful thing to now be thinking about. The house itself was actually quite beautiful in its own way. It was a 2-story whitewashed cottage. I'm not really sure of the history of the place. It had pretty thick walls, and the roof looked a little bit uneven in parts. I guess that's just the way it had settled over the years. It was a little bit weathered on the outside in patches, but like I said, it was quite beautiful in its own way. It was somewhat isolated. There was no neighbouring houses immediately either side of it. There was just loads of fields. And I told myself it was a bonus. It was quiet. The girls would have space. We would have privacy. And after the stress of packing up our own house and trying to coordinate everything around the renovation, there was something attractive about the idea of disappearing into the countryside for a while. I think my wife initially fell in love with the place, and the girls, from what I remember, were mostly interested in who would get which bedroom and whether the Wi-Fi was decent. They were children, after all. They adapted to things more easily than we did. To them, I think it felt like a bit of an adventure. We moved in not long after the first visit. For the first few months, there was absolutely nothing unusual about living in this place. That is something I always stress when I tell this, because it was not as though we moved in and immediately felt uncomfortable. It was quite the opposite, really. Once we had unpacked and got into our usual routine, this cottage became home, just a temporary home for us. The girls settled in really quickly. They each took one of the bedrooms upstairs, and within a couple of weeks their things were everywhere in the usual way that they are: clothes over chairs, chargers on the floor. Because the house was so isolated, nights were incredibly quiet. There was no traffic. It took a little bit of getting used to. About 6 months of living there, longer than what we thought. In the end, we ended up being there for just under a year. Millie woke up one night and had what any parent would describe as a nightmare. She pretty much woke up screaming. She wasn't calling out, but a proper scream. And it was the type of scream that woke up the whole house. My wife and I jumped up straight away, and by the time we reached her room, she was already coming out of it crying and shaking, and she kept on saying that there was a man at her window, that someone had been trying to get in. She was completely terrified. She didn't seem to be half asleep or confused. She was wide awake, and she was clinging to my wife, insisting that she had seen someone outside trying to open the window. So I went over to the window to check it. It was closed and the latch was on it. I remember opening the window and looking out. It was dark, but there was nothing there. There was no movement or sound. You also would have needed a ladder to get to the window. There was no ladder. There was nothing to suggest that anyone had been near the house. And at that point, we did what most parents do. We told her that she just had a nightmare, that she was probably woken suddenly and imagined this. But she insisted that it was real, and eventually she agreed to go and sleep in her sister's room for the night. She was the younger daughter, and she had never acted like this before. She was really, really reluctant to go back into her room. But hey, it's just a bad dream. The next day, she did not want to sleep in her room. She said she didn't feel comfortable. And I think after her insisting that she wanted to sleep in with her sister, we didn't push it. And our other daughter was okay with her staying there, so it wasn't really an issue. And we didn't think too much about the whole thing until a few weeks later, when I ended up sleeping in that room myself. So like I said, a few weeks passed and everything had kind of returned back to normal. After a while, the spare room became somewhere where we kept a few bags and things that we had not fully unpacked. And the door was usually closed. I don't really remember exactly what the argument was about, nor would I share, but it wasn't anything major, and it was one of those rows that couples have when things were a bit stressful. And I decided to sleep in the spare room for the night. At some point, I woke up. I feel there was definitely a sound that woke me up, but I don't know what it was. Once I was awake, I heard this sound of scraping and this kind of shifting noise pretty much beside me. And I turned my head towards the window, and that's when I saw a man. There was a man in the middle of the window climbing into the room. The window was open, and I could see him with one leg already inside the room, bent over the sill with his hands there, braced against the frame as if he was pulling himself through. And this wasn't vague or shadowy. It was definitely bright outside. It must have been a full moon, or pretty much a full moon, because I could see details of this man. He looked like he was maybe in his late 40s or 50s. He was dressed in dark trousers. He had a heavy coat. He had boots on. He was dressed for winter, cold winter, but it was early autumn and it wasn't particularly cold. We had pretty good weather. After I realised that there was a man coming into the room, I reacted straight away. I shouted, sat up, and I reached for the bedside lamp to turn it on. And once I switched it on, I expected him to either fully jump into the room and attack me or pull himself back out. And once I turned the light on, the room was empty. The window was closed. There was absolutely no one in the room except for me. And it wasn't as though he had moved quickly or he could have ducked out of sight. One moment he was halfway through the window, and the next there was nothing. The latch was in place exactly as it should have been, and the curtains weren't even moving. I pretty much got out of bed straight away and went to the window, and I opened it and leaned out and looked down, and there was no lather, there was no sound, there was no marks on the wall, no sound of anybody running away. I don't know how you explain that. I just remember sitting back on the bed. It had not felt like a dream. It had felt as real as anything. I can still remember his clothing, what he looked like age-wise, his position of his leg coming through the window. None of this made any sense to me. I checked on the girls, I checked on my wife, I went downstairs, I made sure everything was locked. My wife woke up briefly and asked what was wrong, and I told her that I thought I heard something outside and I was just checking. Didn't want to alarm anybody in the middle of the night, but I did not sleep for the rest of that night. And the following morning I kept thinking about it. Later the next day, I mentioned gently to my daughter about the time she thought that a man was coming into her room, and I just simply asked her what she had seen that night, what she had woken up to. I hadn't asked her before because I just thought it was a nightmare. You don't really go into the details of the child's nightmare and drum up them crying again. And she told me that it was a man who was climbing into her window, and he had dark trousers and a coat and boots. And I asked her, what age was he? Was he younger or... And she said, he was around your age, Dad. To me, it felt like this was the same man. We had both witnessed this same man climbing in through the window in that room. I did tell my wife about it eventually. We all decided, without really saying anything, that nobody would sleep in that room again. We kept the door closed, and then after a few days I started to lock it. Not because I genuinely thought someone was going to come out of that room, but was more of a practical thing. If there had been an intruder, at least we would know if the door had been opened. It made no sense, but it gave me a small sense of control over something that didn't make any sense. And again, after that, life carried on as normal. We had school, we had work, dinner, the usuals, checking on this renovation as well. I was still unsettled about the whole thing, and my wife was a bit on edge. And to reassure everyone, I bought one of those small solar-powered motion sensor lights that you can place outside. It was just something that would trigger a light if there was movement near the house. Months went by and nothing happened. That bedroom door stayed locked, and by that point we had been living in the cottage for quite a long time, longer than what we wanted. The renovation at our own house had dragged on. There had been delays, but we were slowly getting to the point where we would be needing to move back into our old house again. I don't know what I thought about what I had witnessed that night at that point, because we had gone months without experiencing anything. You do question yourself as time goes on, and I mean, it was just a cottage in the countryside. Did we both have bad dreams in that room? I was beginning to have that mentality. And then one night we were all woken at the same time. It was just after 1 o'clock in the morning. There was a lot of commotion coming from that locked bedroom. What it sounded like was stumbling. Then it would stop, then there would be this dragging noise, and that was followed by pretty loud walking across the floorboards. My wife and I just sat up in bed, and I remember her saying to me, "Can you hear that?" The two of us got up and went straight to the girls' room. They were already awake. The sound was definitely coming from that locked bedroom. Somebody was most definitely inside. And for both of us, that was definitely confirmed by the sound of what I would call a short, dry cough, which was the type of sound that you would expect from a male adult. I think that was the moment that my stomach pretty much dropped. I told my wife to go into our bedroom and lock the door with the two girls, and I went to the spare bedroom and could still hear all this noise as I was there outside the door. And I called out, "Who's in there?" There was no answer. The sounds completely stopped. I tried the handle and it was locked, so I unlocked the door, turned on the light, and the room was empty. Everything looked exactly as it had been before. The window was shut, the latch was in place. Nothing had been disturbed, there were no boxes knocked over. Again, there was absolutely no sign that anyone had been inside. We checked the rest of the house, just to be sure, and the doors were locked. There was no movement outside, the sensor light had not been triggered. All four of us had heard the noises that were coming from that room. And after that, then everything completely changed for us. We didn't want to be living there at all anymore. the girls were properly frightened. And they did not want to go upstairs at all when it got dark. Even during the day, they avoided going near their bedroom. And we agreed that we needed to stay somewhere else until the renovation was complete, or at least to the point where we could move in. It didn't feel worth pushing through another few weeks in that house. And luckily for us, after a couple of days, we had worked out the logistics, and I stayed with one of my daughters in my parents' place, and my wife stayed with another daughter in my sister's place. We couldn't really keep what happened in the house quiet because the girls were telling everybody. I'm not really sure what our family thought about the whole thing, but it was very much real for us. I think we only ended up in that situation for about 2 weeks before we were able to move in. So once we had fully moved out, we returned to our own house and rang the owner of the cottage. And I felt that I should tell him, partly because I thought that he might want to check the place, or partly because I wanted some kind of reaction. And I explained everything as calmly as I could. The night my daughter saw someone at the window and what I experienced and the sounds from that room. He didn't seem particularly concerned. He didn't really dismiss it either. He said something along the lines of strange. And that was more or less it. And there was no suggestion that he had heard anything similar before. I did kind of feel he was a little bit relaxed about it all, but what can you do? So a few days later, we needed to take the last few bits from the cottage and bring them back to our renovated house. And like I said, the house doesn't have any immediate neighbours either side, but there is, of course, houses along the road. And I decided to stop in at the one that was closest to us. I think I kind of spun it as we were staying there, doing up our house, and it's a great area, and it's very beautiful around here, and asked did they have any history on the house, because it's such a beautiful cottage. They said not really. They said it had changed hands frequently, and that now it was short lets, that sort of thing. I hadn't mentioned anything about the man coming in through the window or the noises, and they added that they remembered one woman who stayed there briefly the previous summer. Apparently she had to call the police one night because she thought someone was trying to break in. And the reason they knew this was because police had come to their door asking if they had seen anything unusual in the area. And they did not know any more than that. And finished it off by saying that I think it was just a misunderstanding or something. I didn't tell them about our experience. I just thanked them and left. Part of me would love to know if that woman saw what we saw. Thank you to Tom C for sending in his paranormal experience. If you like what you hear, make sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss any future episodes of Scary. And if you haven't done so already, and the platform where you listen to the podcast permits you to do a review, please consider writing a 5-star review. It really helps the show get seen, or you can simply just tell a friend. Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and join me next time for another episode of Scary.
Hey, this is Paige DeSorbo from Giggly Squad, and today I want to talk to you about Boost Mobile. Quick question, why are we letting our phone bills bully us? Here's a money tip. Stop paying a carrier tax. When you bring your own phone and switch to Boost Mobile's $25 unlimited forever plan, you can unlock up to $600 in savings. That's real-life money, not money trapped in a pricey phone bill. $600 is a trip, a shopping spree, or paying something off. Your money belongs in your life. You get unlimited data, talk, and text for $25 a month with no contracts and no minimum phone line requirement. Your phone, your rules. Head to boostmobile.com to switch today and unlock the savings you actually deserve. After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience lower speed. Customers pay $25 per month while active on Boost Mobile Unlimited plan. Savings claim based on a January 2026 Boost Mobile survey comparing average annual payments of major carrier customers to 12 months on the Boost Mobile Unlimited plan. Visit boostmobile.com for details.
Youth mental health is a complex challenge that requires comprehensive solutions. We must strengthen after-school programs. We must make digital literacy tools available in our schools. We must work with mental health professionals to support children. And we must empower mentors, educators, and parents to keep kids happy. Learn more about our commitment to finding lasting solutions at empowerourfuturecoalition.com/solutions. Paid for by the Coalition to Empower Our Future.
If you work in university maintenance, Granger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Granger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more, and all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRANGER, visit Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
Work moves fast. Every email, report, and proposal counts. That's where Grammarly comes in. It's your one place to think, write, and finish. Grammarly's AI agents help you find natural phrasing, fine-tuned tone, and confidently write wherever you work. It's the premier writing tool that 93% of users trust to get more work done. In a world of generic AI, don't sound like everyone else. With Grammarly, you never will. Download Grammarly for free at Grammarly.com.
Youth mental health is a complex challenge that requires comprehensive solutions. We must strengthen after-school programs. We must make digital literacy tools available in our schools. We must work with mental health professionals to support children. And we must empower mentors, educators, and parents to keep kids happy. Learn more about our commitment to finding lasting solutions at empowerourfuturecoalition.com/solutions. Paid for by the Coalition to Empower Our Future.
If you work in university maintenance, Granger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Granger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more, and all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRANGER, visit Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.